President Trump threatens to eradicate Hamas if it doesn't uphold a ceasefire with Israel as top U.S. officials rush to the region to preserve a fragile peace. Dr. Oz returns, this time amid praise from an unexpected source, Mark Cuban, who credits White House efforts to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. The government shutdown, day 20, the No Kings protest, 5 to 7 million. Maryland Democratic Congressman Johnny Olszewski breaks down these and other numbers. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. Never seen anything like it. That, as you know, is a favorite phrase of President Trump. He says it so often and in so many different venues, in fact, that it has almost become white rhetorical noise. A week ago, however, the president used it about the ceasefire he negotiated between Israel and Hamas with a certain deeper resonance. That ceasefire included the return of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners. It carried extravagant ambitions of a disarmed Hamas, benign governance of Gaza, and a multinational effort to rebuild that devastated enclave. Trump placed this achievement, still in its infancy, in a never-before-seen timeline of 500 years, maybe even 3,000 years. Well, we're a week in, and cracks are forming. Hamas violence, Israeli military reprisals, deaths on both sides. The president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his top diplomatic envoy, Steve Witkoff, met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today to keep things from unraveling. Vice President J.D. Vance left tonight for Israel. This has been seen before. U.S. presidents negotiating for peace, details proving difficult, shuttle diplomacy ensuing. This time, though, Trump appears ready to enforce or settle things on his terms, suggesting, as he did today, the U.S. could grow ever more involved, possibly even militarily. Here's how he put it.
We made a deal with Hamas that, they're going to be very good, they're going to behave, they're going to be nice, and if they're not, we're going to go and we're going to eradicate them if we have to.
That sounds ominous, and yet Hamas has almost no friends left in the region, ideologically or financially. Its zone of influence within Gaza has shrunk dramatically. What it can do to spoil the peace and for how long, no one quite knows. But in the category of that which has never been seen before, these uncertainties, stained with blood and drenched in diplomatic heartbreak, are all too familiar. And peace, as it turns out, is hard to achieve, not only in the Middle East, but in Ukraine. And it's been roiled by recent U.S. military actions near South America. For insight into much of this, we begin at the White House with Olivia Rinaldi. Olivia, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. Start with the Middle East and what the president said about Hamas and the prospects for keeping this trajectory on pace.
Well, Major, just 10 days in, it appears that this ceasefire, this truce, is on fragile ground. As you mentioned, Special Envoy Witkoff, the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and who's acting as really an outside advisor to the situation in the Middle East, have been deployed there to sit down with Netanyahu and make sure everything is still on track. There are perhaps no quick triggers to what we saw over the weekend when there was violence on either side, strikes on either side. Vice President Vance also making a trip to the region, expecting to land there at some point tomorrow and to meet with with people within the Israeli cabinet to talk to them about what's going on the ground and keeping the peace between Israel and Hamas. But today you heard what really was frustration from the president of what we saw over the weekend. They are insisting that this ceasefire is still in place just 10 days later. But the president did say we're going to eradicate them if we have to. And it's the we that had the people in the cabinet room with the president today as he was meeting with the Australian Prime Minister questioning who's we, who would go into a situation in Gaza. The president later said that countries have been calling him, telling him, quote, we'd love to go in and take care of the situation ourselves in regards to Hamas and the killing of innocent Palestinians, which is something we have seen over the last several days. He also said you'd love to have Israel go in within 2 minutes. I could tell Netanyahu to go in and take care of it. He said, but right now we haven't said that, saying we're going to give peace a little bit of a chance. But knowing this president, the question is just how long is he willing to give them that chance?
And Olivia, very quickly, last week a phone call with Russian President Putin, a meeting at the White House with Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and the president still non-committal on those all-important Tomahawk missiles to the Ukrainians.
Right. President Zelensky leaving the White House did not get those Tomahawk missiles, did not get the agreement that he wanted there. And in fact, the president on Truth Social saying that they should just call it a truce where it is right now and let history decide, freeze the lines where they are. This is a reversal from what President Trump said last month when he said he believes that Ukraine can win back everything that it has lost in this 3-year-long war. So certainly in a reversal there, Zelensky, speaking to reporters earlier today, said that the President Trump just does not want an escalation with Russia before he meets with Russian President Vladimir Putin. But, Major, we still do not have a date for that alleged meeting between the president of the U.S. and president of Russia in Budapest, Hungary. We have a location. We just do not have a date yet.
Olivia Rinaldi at the White House. Thanks so very much. The Department of Defense, which the White House calls the Department of War, has released this video footage from Friday's deadly strike on an alleged drug-carrying vessel in the Caribbean Sea. 3 people were killed in what is the 7th known strike on a South American boat since last month. Eleanor Watson joins me now at the desk. Eleanor, always great to see you. What do we know about this, and particularly the survivors? Are they in U.S. custody, and if so, under what auspices or conditions?
I'll start with what we know. As you said, this is the 7th known strike against an alleged drug boat in the Caribbean as part of the Trump administration's war against drug cartels. Secretary Hegseth, in announcing this strike, compared the cartels to al-Qaeda, saying they will be hunted down and killed just like al-Qaeda. What we've seen so far in the Caribbean is the same type of whack-a-mole strategy, or in this case, whack-a-boat strategy that proved controversial during the global war on terror when it turned out you can't kill all of the terrorists. One former military lawyer I spoke to said there are some facts on the Trump administration side to justify strikes against drug runners, including that over 80,000 Americans die each year from drug overdoses. However, many of those drugs, like fentanyl, come to the U.S. from places like China and Mexico, not through the Caribbean, which has many Democrats in Congress worried that the buildup in the region coinciding with these strikes is part of a drift towards a larger war against Venezuela. The survivors you mentioned from last Thursday's strike that killed 2 individuals and left 2 survivors. The survivors were from Colombia and Ecuador, not Venezuela. The U.S. has returned those individuals back to their home countries where it's expected they'll be prosecuted for drug trafficking. The U.S., in choosing to return them, avoided a potentially thorny issue because if it had kept them in custody, then they would have potentially been held as unlawful combatants in a place like Guantanamo Bay or prosecuted in open court here in the United States. Going to court would almost certainly require the administration to provide more information about these strikes than it has done publicly. All we've gotten from the administration so far is the videos on social media, none of the intelligence that identifies these boats as posing a direct threat to the United States.
And there are questions in Congress about the evidence for all these allegations. Rand Paul, Republican from Kentucky, has raised some. He did so this weekend. Let's listen.
You know, when you kill someone, you should know, if you're not at war, not in a declared war, you really need to know someone's name, at least. You have to accuse them of something. You have to present evidence. So all of these people have been blown up without us knowing their name, without any evidence of a crime.
That is part of Congress's persistent questioning of this administration.
Senator Rand Paul, along with some Democratic congressmen, are planning to introduce another war powers resolution to block further action in Venezuela. A resolution last week to block these strikes failed.
And there's also a question about whether some of this is about regime change in Venezuela. We don't know, but it's certainly out there. Eleanor Watson, always a pleasure. Thanks so much. Next on the Takeout, the healthcare fight that has all of us stuck in the federal government shutdown and what that might mean for millions of Americans, insured and uninsured. Dr. Mehmet Oz joins me. Keeping the peace, U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are, as we have said, in Israel, working to keep the Gaza peace deal alive. We'll have the latest on the state of play. Plus, 84 days into a 7-year sentence, disgraced former Republican Congressman George Santos released from prison because his sentence was commuted by President Trump. More on that when we come back. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Senate Democrats and those who caucus with them continue to demand binding negotiations with the White House on access to health care, Medicaid, and enhanced Obamacare subsidies before they will vote to end the current government shutdown. Here was Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders today on CBS Mornings.
Before I vote on a bill that will right now allow 50,000 people to die unnecessarily, I want it absolutely clear that that will not happen.
Administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, joins me now. Dr. Oz, your reaction to Bernie Sanders?
I'm not sure what he's talking about. There's no program that I'm aware of that's going to lead to the death of 50,000 Americans. But what I will tell you is that a lot of the arguments made by the Democrats are all falling flat because the more we investigate their claims that there was no fraud, waste, and abuse in Medicaid, for example, which was a major focus of the One Big Beautiful Bill. This now called the Working Families Tax Cut legislation that the Senate passed. Bernie Sanders wasn't part of that, but enough of his colleagues voted for it that it became the law of the land, addressed a lot of this fraud, waste, and abuse. And we decided to go an extra step. And I want to announce that data here today with you. We asked investigators, and we upgraded the team doing this. We sent them out and said, find out how many people were actually getting Medicaid funding who were illegal immigrants, who were undocumented, weren't supposed to be here. Now, we were told that this wasn't happening. It turns out, there's a number. You ready for this, Major? $1.2 billion already in just the last few months were spent by Medicaid, go out of this agency, federal dollars, to support states who are paying for illegal immigrants. Now, this is maddening for a bunch of reasons. First, we were told it wasn't happening. So the One Big Beautiful Bill gave us the ability to go after this funding, which we're now doing. We're going to pull back that funding. In fact, some of the states are realizing that this is money that they were sort of caught red-handed taking from the federal government and are already refunding the money to the federal government. But it also heightens my awareness that there's a lot of misinformation being touted out there by Democrats arguing this is a good reason to close the government. I don't think you should close your government if what we're trying to do is protect taxpayers from having money sent without their knowledge to illegal immigrants in other states. As an example, California, which is responsible for a lion's share of that illegal immigrant funding, they offer free dental, free eye exams. Again, I'm not against those. But if you're going to offer those to Medicaid patients who are illegally here in California, you should not ask taxpayers in Texas or in Florida to pay the bill. Pay it yourself. But that wasn't how the deal was. They wanted to be really nice about this money until it was their money that needed to be spent to pay for it. And as soon as that became evident, they began to pull back on some of those services. So to Bernie Sanders and all the other Democrats arguing that they're shutting down government under false pretext, I want to call their attention to actual facts, on the ground knowledge that we are spending federal tax dollars to support illegal immigrants. We now have a study going in over half a dozen states. The numbers are increasing, and it's alarming. Thank goodness that law was passed. It should not be repealed in order to reopen the government.
So, Dr. Oz, terminology here is very important. And I've heard the states that you're mentioning, specifically California, say that the Medicaid money is separate from the state money that they have allocated for undocumented immigrants. You and other Republicans have argued that it's all fungible. But are you talking about direct Medicaid dollars going directly to undocumented personnel in California or some of these other blue states that have decided to use their own state money to provide these insurance benefits?
Major, yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
I was told exactly what you were told, that this is a commingling of dollars, not really. Maybe you're blaming us for some administrative costs, but that's not really the case. We're talking about actual dollars that were sent from the federal government to Medicaid in several states. It wasn't just California. And just to give additional credence to my claim, again, this is coming from federal investigators looking at Medicaid dollars spent in California. California has already rebated us several $100s of the money I'm talking about. And we're going to continue to take the rest of the money back because it's not theirs. It's the taxpayers' money. And again, I'm going to reemphasize this. If you're watching this program, and I don't want to pick on California, they're not the only ones that are guilty of this. But if you want to, in one of the many states that do not allow money to be spent for illegal immigrants on Medicaid, why should your tax dollars to the federal government be redirected to that exact purpose in a different state? It's a nation of 50 states. We should all agree on this issue. If the American people want us to pay for illegal immigrants getting medical care, I'll happily dispense those dollars from Washington. But until we do that, I should not be doing that very thing. And that's why this one big, beautiful bill was so important. It actually prevents people like me, because there'll be future generations of CMS administrators, from doling out money coming into the government from one state that doesn't allow illegal immigrant Medicaid funding to another state that decides they want to do it.
Dr. Oz, we're going to continue this conversation, not on this topic, but on pharmacy benefit managers, Trump RX, and Cost Plus, which is, as you know, run by Mark Cuban. But I want to play for you some sound today that was on CNBC from Mark Cuban about the administration's efforts to reduce prescription drug costs. Please listen.
Dr. Oz has been great. Like I would tell the Biden administration all this stuff, right? It just wasn't important to them. Some people it was. CMS, they had some great people there, but it just didn't get to the top, right? This administration, completely different. I'm not saying I'm a Donald Trump fan now, but credit where credit is due. They are trying their best to reduce the cost of prescriptions and of health care and of insurance.
And are they receptive to the
all this stuff, right? Yeah, all this stuff, right?
Do you think we'll see that?
No.
Why?
Because the PBMs and their insurance companies are too powerful.
So you heard the last part of that, Dr. Oz. No, it's not going to be successful. Pharmacy benefit managers, too powerful. Insurance companies, too powerful. But Mark Cuban, not a Trump guy, offering you praise for efforts undertaken thus far.
Well, Mark Cuban is a very competitive person, I know, because we both used to play in the NBA Celebrity All-Star games, and I'd have to guard him. He's sharp-elbowed.
Wasn't expecting that reference, but please continue.
But being a competitive person myself, we are going to succeed. And yes, he's right. There are powerful forces who benefit tremendously from the current system, or we would have changed it generations ago. But people like me, and there are many others, Chris Klump, Ana Hernandez, John Brooks, many others have come in the government because President Trump recruited us, because he's given us confidence, those of us coming from the private sector, that we can make a difference. It's a generational opportunity to do exactly what Mark Cuban was talking about, to address some of the shortcomings of the current system. And none of us are here for life. You know, I'm glad to do this job for a couple of years, proud to serve the president, and he's passionate about making sure that we don't slow down at all. He just pushes all the time. He calls and says, what's next? The most favored nation pricing is a good example of this. Everybody said it wasn't possible. I don't think anybody that I talked to knew the space believed that we would be able to achieve what we've already done over the last few weeks, to announce that this country will no longer allow its citizens to pay 3 times more for the exact same drugs made in the same factory, put in the same bottles in this country than those same drugs cost overseas. And we've effected that change with the leading U.S. company, Pfizer, the leading European company, AstraZeneca. Last week, a wonderful program with a subsidiary of Merck that actually does most of the fertility drugs in this country, that drops those prices. And now, Major, we're using most favored nation drug pricing to catalyze other changes in the healthcare system. Because once you bring down pharmacy pricing, the costs of drugs, all of a sudden you can begin to impact on how the pharmacy benefits management companies function. That's the group that Mark Cuban was speaking about, that he competes with his company. And they actually came to the table last week in the Oval Office and agreed to drop their costs so we can make fertility medications more affordable to the American people. That's the kind of catalytic shifts we are expecting and we're already seeing. And there are many others I can give you, but if you go to industry and say, listen, I've got a bat that I can use on you. I've got legal, legislative solutions here, statutory. I've got regulations I can pass. Or we can sit down and have a real hard brass knuckles discussion about what's feasible. If you can do it yourself in a more nimble way, we'll support it.
I want to have you back here to talk about the brass knuckles and the practical realities that brass knuckles can sometimes achieve, even in the most difficult and cumbersome marketplaces. Dr. Oz, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Same, Major. Take care.
Next on the Takeout, Maryland Democratic Congressman Johnny Olszewski is here. Johnny O, he's right. He's actually right over there. His response to Dr. Oz: Republicans, the shutdown, and the No Kings rallies this weekend. Next on the Takeout. Welcome back to the Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. You know I love hanging out here. Government shutdown, well, you know it, I know it, entering its 4th week. House, you might not know this, but it's true, remains in recess, not operating at all. That's at Speaker Mike Johnson's direction. And he says it's not going to come back into any kind of session until the government reopens, which means it's a Senate thing. Maybe, maybe not. Maryland Democratic Congressman Johnny Olszewski joins me now. well known to his friends as Johnny O. I'm not sure if I'm a friend, if I qualify, but Johnny, it's great to have you here.
You
Thanks
qualify,
for doing
absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
You heard Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz said direct Medicaid dollars in certain states in this country are going to undocumented immigrants in violation of federal law, and Democrats are not reopening the government because they want to turn that spigot back on.
We're not trying to change well-established federal law. And if there's a violation of federal law, if there's fraud in Medicaid, that should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And if it's happening currently, it's happening under this administration's watch. And so I would encourage the Trump administration to take a look at what's happening and to enforce federal law working with states. I don't think anyone wants to see the law violated, and current law is very clear. If you are undocumented, you are not eligible for Medicaid.
But you are among the House Democrats that object to changes in the so-called One Beautiful Bill, Big Beautiful Bill, that impose new work requirements and other stipulations to even qualify for Medicaid.
You know, the truth of the matter is that most people are already working. And so the vast majority the vast majority of people on Medicaid are already working. And so I think it's a little bit of a distraction from the issue and the billions of dollars of cuts that are made both there as well as food benefits with SNAP and TANF for hardworking Americans who are just trying to get by. And in exchange for what? In exchange for ballooning our deficit and for one of the largest wealth transfers from the working class to the ultra wealthy in this country. And so we're seeing that again now, where there's a lack of desire to come together during the shutdown and extend the subsidies for almost 20 million Americans who rely on those subsidies to make health care affordable. I mean, we're staring at up to $3,000 tax increase. That's what it is. If we don't act, we're going to raise taxes on hardworking Americans across this country, in addition to people who are lucky enough to have an employer-based health care plan. Those rates are going to go up too.
Johnny O, based on differing estimates, the range 5 million to 7 million Americans participated this Saturday in No Kings protests. Here's the President of the United States and his reaction.
I think it's a joke. I looked at the people. They're not representative of this country. And I looked at all the brand new signs paid for, I guess it was paid for by Soros and other radical left lunatics. I'm not a king. I work my off to make our country great. That's all it is. I'm not a king at all.
Johnny O. Congressman, forgive me.
That's fine.
Either way.
That's what everybody back home calls me. Look, it's not a joke. It is exercising one of the most fundamental rights that we have as Americans, to go out there and peaceably demonstrate against our government. Free speech is a bedrock of our Constitution, of our democracy. And actually what was disheartening and was disappointing was to see the president, after millions of Americans showed up to protest many of his actions, he then posted an AI-generated video of him literally putting feces over Americans. I mean, it is beneath the dignity of that office, and it is deeply disturbing and concerning to me.
And when he says, looking at the crowds, they're not representative of what America is, what does that suggest to you?
I think that it means the president needs to go back to my American government class. I was an American government teacher before coming to Congress, and, you know, this is what our country is all about having that robust discourse. And actually, Congress and the Trump administration could probably learn something by going to these protests and these rallies and actually talking to the people who showed up. I attended 2 this past weekend. There was no George Soros. There was no organized. These were average people coming out because they were concerned about any number of issues of what they're seeing from this administration, and they want to see change.
Congressman, your district, Baltimore County, how many federal workers?
We have over 20,000 federal workers in my district alone.
Are they burning up your phone saying, end this shutdown so I can get paid?
Absolutely.
But they want you to do something different, or they want you to do exactly what you're doing?
But they also want us to do something about the healthcare costs. What's that?
Do they want you to end it and capitulate or give in, or do they want you to keep fighting?
They want to go back to work, but they also want us to address this looming healthcare crisis. And so we are hearing from...
You're not getting any static on that?
Of course. Look, these 3 things I know are true about the shutdown. One is that our federal employees are taking the brunt of this. They have mortgages to pay, kids to feed. That Americans are also suffering through this, where our food isn't being inspected, our airlines are being canceled because we don't have enough air traffic controllers. And that 3, Americans want us to just sit down in a room and actually have a conversation. I think we should lock the president and the leadership of both parties in a room and not let them come out until something happens. I mean, it is so frustrating to me that Speaker Johnson has now canceled votes for the 3rd week in a row. Congress is not working. Meanwhile, Americans are dealing with a cost of living crisis that is crushing them at home. And so we could do so much to address that, whether it's housing, childcare, electric bills, Congress should be in session addressing that and releasing the Epstein files.
And when Congress isn't in session, the Speaker has said Adelita Grijalva, Congresswoman-elect from Arizona, Tucson District, cannot be sworn in. The implications of that?
I can't explain that. So you have a speaker who has now violated all of the norms and standards, including the ones that he set. Speaker Johnson said whenever she wants it, and she said immediately. He said she deserves pomp and circumstance in her family. She said, I don't care about that. He said, I'll follow the Pelosi standard. We're now well beyond that, too, in terms of the number of days to swear in a representative there. Representative-elect Grijalva has been duly elected. She has been certified by her state. It is one of the most basic tenets of our democracy that we deserve representation, and the people of Arizona are being denied that representation, and there's only one reason that makes sense. She would be the last signature on the discharge petition to force the vote on the Epstein files, and for the life of me, I can't understand why Speaker Johnson, who's a father just like me, would want to protect and is taking action to protect sexual predators. I just think it's wrong.
He has told me twice on this program that the Oversight Committee investigation is good enough. I don't need a discharge petition.
I just think the American people don't buy that. I certainly don't buy that. We should have released these files years ago. And so I think we should be acting with urgency, with haste. There's no reason that we rushed in to pass this big, ugly bill that saddled our children with debt, that took away all the health care and the food benefits. There's no reason we can't have that same sense of urgency of holding the rich and the powerful who abused children accountable in this circumstance.
The Speaker has said this week it's possible there could be floor votes on paying federal workers and providing direct appropriations for the military. Would you support both of those?
Absolutely. And I am already on a letter urging the Speaker to do that. So I do urge Speaker Johnson to bring us back. Let's do our job. Let's pay our military. But let's also address this cost of living crisis that all of America is struggling with.
Maryland Democratic Congressman John, no one calls him John, they call him Johnny Olszewski. Johnny O, appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Please come back.
Will do.
Still to come, one of the world's most famous museums remains closed. You probably heard about it this over the weekend, the heist at the Louvre. Worthy of a Hollywood script, actually much better than a Hollywood script because they're all full of techno stuff. This is like a smash and grab. More on that later. Very soon, rather, on the Takeout. Welcome back. Here's a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. Lawyers for former FBI Director James Comey have asked a judge to dismiss the federal charges against him. Comey was indicted on 2 counts for allegedly lying during congressional testimony. In a late-day filing, Comey's lawyers assert the case is vindictive in its prosecution and unlawful. They say that President Trump has a history of criticizing Comey and that he did not follow the law in appointing the interim U.S. attorney who brought the case, Lindsay Halligan, into that role. Well, it's a tough day if you use any of the online Amazon Web Services. You see a graphic with many of them there now. Snapchat, Fortnite, Amazon Shopping, Alexa apps, and much, much more were effective. Amazon says its services are in the process of being recovered and recovering, but reports of problems continue. The situation appears to have stemmed from a system designed to monitor how much traffic is on the network, which can cause slow speeds or disruptions in service. That appears to be what's gone on. Tonight, the search is on, and that's putting it very mildly, for several items stolen from the Louvre's French crown jewels collection. I probably garbled that pronunciation, and all the French people there listening to me will be clucking their tongues at me. I understand that. I want to find these jewels before they're lost forever. Officials say 4 robbers broke into that world-famous museum Sunday. It's in Paris, everyone knows that, using a crane-type lift to reach an elevated window. It took them 7 minutes. The suspects were able to break in to these areas, grab 7 pieces of jewelry, and then escape on scooters. This heist can only be described as daring, especially because it took place while the museum was open. It's being called many things, among them a national embarrassment. Still to come, is phase 2 in doubt? We're talking about the president's Middle East peace plan. Negotiators are working to prevent Israel and Hamas from regaining or reasserting the war that was ended by last week's ceasefire. Veteran State Department negotiator Aaron David Miller joins me next to discuss and examine here on The Takeout. Welcome back to the Takeout. As we noted at the top of the show, U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are in Israel today to help shore up the Gaza peace deal. It is, fair to say, in a kind of fragile state after Israel launched a heavy wave of retaliatory attacks in Gaza against Hamas. Israeli officials say Hamas fired on its soldiers and killed 2 of them. Aaron David Miller joins me now, senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, deeply experienced in this region within the State Department and negotiating for years and years. So, Aaron David Miller, I want to play for you sound from last night's 60 Minutes, in which Leslie Stahl sat down with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and asked about their trip to Gaza. Let's please play that.
So, you decide to go to Gaza. And what did you see?
It looked almost like a nuclear bomb had been set off in that area. And then you see these people moving back, and I asked the IDF, where are they going? Like, I'm looking around, these are all ruins. And they said, well, they're going back to the areas where their destroyed home was, onto their plot, and they're going to pitch a tent. And it's very sad, because you think to yourself, they really have nowhere else to go.
Would you say now, having been there, that it was genocide?
No. No.
Absolutely not. No. No, there was a war being fought.
Evaluate that for me.
You know, look, I don't get into this discussion because, frankly, it really doesn't change one iota of the situation on the ground. All it does is drive the parties, frankly, to their respective corners. And since the international community has failed to impose a single cost or consequence that normal humans, measure like you and I, would agree constitutes significant pressure on either of the parties, Israel and Hamas, until very recently, I might add, enter President Trump. I think the question is how to change the realities on the ground. That's where you need to be tough and outspoken. And we'll see if that happens. You have a 20-point plan that's long on principles and short on deeds. You had a signing ceremony in Sharm el-Sheikh. I was at least 3 of them there over the course of the last, when I was working on this issue. And on Monday morning, negotiators look at each other and say, hey, you know, we got a lot of work to do. What are we going to do now? Witkoff, Kushner, and later this week, maybe even tomorrow, Vice President of the United States, going to go. But the mountains that need to be climbed here, one in particular, how are you going to create an international stabilization force that'll fill in behind the areas from which the Israelis redeploy and stop Hamas from reasserting its control? And then how do you decommission and take Hamas's weapons away from them? The Israelis waged a campaign for 2 years, Major.
Yeah.
And couldn't. So again, a lot of lifts. I just, one last point. President Trump has done something. I worked for 4 or 5 presidents. None of them, without exception, talked to an Israeli prime minister in the way that Donald Trump had talked to Benjamin Netanyahu. None of them brought the kind of pressure on an Israeli prime minister to do something that politically I think he was not interested in doing, and doing something that he probably believed was detrimental to his own political agenda and perhaps even to the interests of Israel as he defines them. That was rather extraordinary. If you do not accept this plan, if Barak Ravid's reporting is accurate on Axios, we will walk away from you.
Right. That's never happened before.
Not since Dwight Eisenhower threatened David Ben-Gurion with political and economic sanctions, 1956, 57, if Ben-Gurion didn't withdraw Israeli forces from Sinai. Has any American president, Republican or Democrat, been that tough? Can he sustain it? Good question.
Indeed. So when the president said today that if Hamas doesn't uphold the ceasefire, we will eradicate them, did that cause you alarm?
No, I mean, is it a serious statement? I mean, let's look at the options. We will eradicate them, and they need to be eradicated. I mean, this organization, by statute and American law, classified as a terror organization, exposed 2 million Palestinian civilians in Gaza, rolled the cosmic roll of the dice exposed 2 million Palestinians to the fury and wrath of what the Israelis were going to do in the wake of the terror surge on October 7th. But what's Trump going to do? Deploy U.S. special forces to Gaza? Occupy Gaza? The Israelis, frankly, they tried. No, the question really becomes, can Trump lean on key Arab actors? Can he use incentives and disincentives, honey and vinegar, with both the Israelis and Hamas? I mean, they are the preeminent decision maker right now in Gaza, in an effort to try to ease them into a situation where they aren't armed, but still play a role. It may be a mission impossible.
The very hardest part of it yet to come. Aaron David Miller, always a pleasure, sir. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
President Trump takes on the No Kings protesters, but should he be worried about this political advocacy and what it might represent nationwide or even in the midterms upcoming next year? Our reporter panel weighs in on that and many other topics next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. I want to show you some pictures of the East Wing of the White House because they show something that you're not used to seeing. Do we have those control room? Maybe not, maybe yes, maybe no. Oh, they're working on it. Well, never mind. I want to bring in our reporter panel. Sophia Kai, White House reporter for Politico. Riley Rogerson, reporter for Notice. Oh, there they are. Okay. Yeah, so that's what's left currently of the East Wing because it's being demolished. Why? To make room for a very large and separate ballroom being constructed with private donations made to President Trump for that purpose. Sophia, you cover the White House. That looks pretty heavy.
This is, I mean, look, this is the thing.
There are those who say that Trump is bringing a wrecking ball to certain institutional norms. Well, whether that's true or not, there's definitely a wrecking ball at the East Room.
Well, look, this is the thing that makes Trump tick. He works on these plans. It's the thing that gives him a little bit of distraction, a bit of levity in between, you know, his other ambitions to end wars, whatever else he's working on. But at the end of the day, he likes to DJ, he likes to host. So that's just like the soft spot, the thing that he scratches, the itch that he scratches is to bring a new ballroom, raise the money, and it's supposed to hold 999 people.
Right. That's a heck of an itch to scratch right there in the East Room. I mean, just knocking it all the way down.
Well, Trump is a very visual person. That's been well documented.
Fact check true. Yes. Yes, indeed.
Right.
So those are the visuals. So we had over the weekend, I'm sure you read about it, you might have even covered it at one level or another, No Kings protests, 5 million to 7 million is the estimate. That's a pretty fair range, it seems to me. And the president said on Air Force One, I'm not a king. We played that sound earlier. But Sophia, you have a piece in Politico that we do have a king. The king of the shutdown.
The king of the shutdown is Russ Vought, director of OMB.
Office of Management and Budget.
Office of Management and Budget. He has, even during a shutdown, more than 400 people working for him. People don't know this, but OMB...
Not furloughed. They're in there doing
They're in there.
The
They're working full time. And it's because OMB is the biggest office of the president. And these are policy-focused experts whose job it is to go through the federal budget line by line by line and bring to the table programs to cut for Russ Vought.
And employees to furlough indefinitely, to essentially lay off in this power vacuum, which the OMB says it can fill during a government shutdown. And there's a legal dispute about that, but they're filling it.
OMB is arguing that, you know, the agencies are making the RIF decisions, the decisions to
reductions in force. That's what a RIF is.
Reductions in force, yes, to fire people permanently. But, you know, of course, we know that OMB and OPM, Office of Personnel Management, they're both very involved in these decisions. And yeah, that's Russ Vought's army that he's built up.
And he enjoys it.
Yes, he's told a group of reporters over breakfast, he says the favorite part of his job is that no detail is too small for Trump. And when he says that, he really means no detail is too small for Russ Vought, who has been empowered by President Trump to make these cuts.
Riley, you also have reporting about Rand Paul. We played some sound from him earlier today, and he's been among many senators, not many, but at a vocal few saying what's going on in South America doesn't have evidence. There has been no declaration of war, and we're in very, if you allow me to mangle a metaphor, choppy legal waters militarily.
Right. He has been incredibly outspoken, and it's not the only issue that Rand Paul has pushed back on the Trump administration on. We're seeing he's the lone Senate Republican who's voted against this Republican-led short-term bill to end the government shutdown 10 times. So it's been really interesting to see him navigate this relationship with the Trump administration. And my colleague spoke with Rand Paul last week, and he said, I think the relationship is actually not terrible. I think, we golf. He posted on Truth Social that my wife is beautiful. And then 48 hours later, Trump posted on a different Truth Social.
Just when you think everything is okay.
Right, calling him a sick wacko. So I think that really shows the perils, the political perils for Republicans who are pushing back on the Trump administration. It's reaching even Rand Paul.
Wading ever deeper into my tortured metaphor, are these waters navigable? I mean, can Rand Paul figure out a way to deal with the White House while still doing what he wants to do?
Right. I think that's going to be the question before him. What we have seen is Congressman Thomas Massie, also from Kentucky, has been the member of the House who's really pushed back on the Trump administration. And he is staring down a Trump-backed primary challenger. He's done that before and he's won. This time, it appears the Trump administration is taking it extremely seriously. Again, Rand Paul is not up until 2028. He hasn't ruled out a presidential run.
Right.
So we'll see. There's less levers that the Trump administration can potentially pull against him.
There's a fine morning show called CBS Mornings. Corinne Jean-Pierre was on this morning and talked about President Biden, what she witnessed, what was or was not working. Listen.
When we talk about the mental acuity, and again, I take this very, very seriously. Yeah. I never saw anyone who wasn't there. I saw someone who was always engaged. I saw someone who understood policy, pushed us on the policy, and also understood history.
So, no problems there. Sophia?
This is a continuing storyline of Democrats trying to figure out what their party stands for.
And those who are very close to President Biden and trying to account for what did or didn't happen. Because there are lots of questions on the minds, not just of reporters and historians, but Democratic voters themselves.
Look, I think you also have to look at, what did 4 years look like? As reporters, we also were very close to Biden. And we saw, in 2021, 2022, he would come and talk to us late night in the choppers when he would land on the South Lawn and walk over from a helicopter. And he'd say, hey, you guys are still out very late. And he would really engage. But, that began to really taper off the last couple of years. It really began to taper off. So, the question is, what did people who, served with him in the White House see? Because we saw that.
Riley, we have 30 seconds.
Right, and I think that this conversation is probably the number one thing that Democrats in Congress would like to avoid. And it's interesting that this continues to come up, continues to be a real challenge for them to respond to. Yeah, it's something they would prefer to avoid, but history and the mindset of the Democratic Party as it approaches the midterms and the 2028 election are not going to let them, even though they very well might. Sophia Kai, Riley Rogerson, thank you. Happy Monday, everyone. This is The Takeout, relentlessly curious, reliably civil, and occasionally clever. It's true. The Daily Report starts now.